Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech video. I'm still sequencing through all my current decks and trying to give updated lists and new texts. And I thought I'd go ahead and shoot out my current Jhoira list. If you haven't noticed, they made a nifty dual deck with this fancy new artwork for Jhoira of the Jit2. I had temporarily taken her apart to explore Crom and Ludwig as a partner deck. And as soon as I saw this new artwork on her come out, I just had to have it. So Crom got immediately stripped apart. Crom, the deck I had, was essentially just a 98 card deck plus Crom because Ludwig never came out, and it was more of a Control Voltron smash deck with a flying haste general, Runechanter's Pike, counterspells, and a lot of derpy shit. But Jhoira of the Jit2, if you haven't seen my previous videos, tends to be the same deck I always run. It's a Time Warp based deck. What Jhoira does, she is a 1 blue red for 2/2 wizard human. She has a single ability at instant speed. I can pay 2 colorless mana, exile a non-land from my hand, put 4 suspend counters on it, and then it gains suspend. Which means every upkeep I take a counter off. It's a creature and it loses all the counters. It comes in with haste. Most Jhoira decks, when they come to competitive things, like to suspend an Ulamog and like a Jackal Hops. Something that destroys all lands and then have a giant threat come into play with haste. The reason that's good is because you can suspend 2 things at a time, and when they come off of suspend, you can choose which one to resolve first. So you resolve the giant board wipe, then the giant threat. I don't really like that. I mean, that's kind of, I'm a hipster, I know. And what better way of playing a hipster than playing it in a completely annoying and obnoxious way? The best way to get rid of suspend counters is simply to take an extra turn. A lot of people like filling in tech to remove suspend counters, but if you combine the actual spells you are wanting to suspend with the effects that make them better, then you're just streamlining your deck. So this is a giant turn combo deck. There's previous deck lists where I had a counter heavy one and a wizard tribal heavy one running a zombie. This one's somewhere in between. I'm kind of trying to optimize my list, make it as streamlined and consistent and competitive and whatnot as possible. Running Jhoira is not actually a competitive thing. While it appears to be competitive, the fact that your effect here essentially delays your spells for 4 turns, it gives opponents 4 turns to prepare, is not good. She's also immediately outclassed by Atraxa, because an Atraxa on play can add suspend counters back onto my card. She can proliferate my suspend counters. So, Jhoira, while she looks threatening, she's not nearly as threatening as a lot of people give her credit for. Let's go on through the deck. The deck itself, as I said, is a Time Warp based deck. So I'm going to start with those. Everything's a bit broken down. There's 12 Time Warps in the deck. The best way to pilot this is to see each of these as an explorer. You play an extra land and you draw a card. How this deck wins is by building up to enough mana to hardcast the big game-ending spells to where you can continually rebuy them or do something stupid over and over again. So until you can do that, there's no problem in just throwing out random Time Warps because that gives you the landfall and the extra card to get to that state. Savor the moment is literally explore. I mean, you just skip your untap, which is 3 mana. Then we have Plead for Power, which is either an Explorer or a Time Warp, or you draw 3. Most opponents let you draw 3. Time Warp is the classic 5-drop that targets a player, so be careful if people play misdirects. Temporal Manipulation is the upgraded version of Time Warp. It does not target. Then we have Time Stop, which is essentially a Time Warp on one opponent. So in 1v1, it's a 6-drop instant speed Time Warp on their upkeep. Walk the Aeons is a 6-drop. It does not exile itself, which is nice. We don't really want to rebuy this because we need lands to keep casting our Time Warps. But Part the Water Veil, it sadly does exile itself. That's a new trend in Time Warps nowadays, is the spell exiles itself. But for 6-drop, we have another Warp, 7-drop Warp that may be an upkeep, we can tutor this to the top of our deck. And Beacon of Tomorrows is the combo spell of the deck. I will reiterate this in this video as I have in all my other videos that runs this combo. You just shuffle this into your deck after you cast it. So if, for example, your deck had no cards in it, and you cast Beacon of Tomorrows, then you can constantly draw Beacon of Tomorrows. There's ways that this combo fails, like if someone has a Howling Mine out, of all things, but it's just, this is the combo one. I'll explain it when we get there. Expropriate, I have no idea how to pronounce this. This is a broken card. This is much, much worse than Time Stretch, which is coming up. So this essentially gives you the choice of a bribery, gain possession spell, or a time warp. The reason this is broken is that you are part of the choice. Like, you get to choose yourself if you want to take a permanent you control or time warp. So no matter what, you will always get a time warp out of this deal before your opponents even choose anything. This is a dumb card. There's a reason this has to be exiled. Time Stretch is the annoying one that people used to think was the game-ending spell, but Expropriate is realistically the new game-ending spell. This one does not exile itself, so you can keep buying it back. Then Temporal Trespass is over here mainly because the mana cost is stupid. This is something that's typically coming off of Jhoira, so don't worry about the mana. But of course, it exiles itself. Let's go on through the rest of the spells. The way the combo works, so let's get that out of the way. There are a few enablers in this deck. Jhoira is one of them. Like, I can just stack a whole bunch of shit on top of her and take the extra turns when they come off suspend. Better yet is I could just cast them at card disadvantage. So I can cast a blue spell, such as Beacon of Tomorrows, by simply discarding any other blue spell from my hand, like a spell that doesn't need anything. That, of course, is vulnerable to the speed of the opponent's removal. There's a Teferi in the deck, and I'll get to him shortly, but that means your opponents can discard cards to destroy this if they have that kind of removal at instant speed. And of course, there's Omniscience. The best thing to do with this, if you have these together, is resolve this one first. With that on the stack, flash out Teferi. No, wait, I said that wrong. With this out, flash Omniscience out by discarding some blue cards. So this is on the stack. With that on the stack, then you want to flash out Teferi. Teferi resolves first. He will be in play before Omniscience resolves. So that means that your opponents can no longer have instant speed removal or answers to your enabling enchantments. Omniscience is just a game-ending card. It's just typically annoying. It allows us to cast everything in our deck for free after we've drawn it. Let's go through the rest of the creatures since I'm right there. There's a few early game effects. Jhoira decks tend to get ran over super early. Like, there's not a lot of room for your winning spells and permission and ways to not die to aggro. So there's a few effects in here to try to stem the bleeding. Gilded Drake and Sower of Temptation are the best effects at that. Something that's just super early. They can come out one before and one after the turn of Jhoira to just slow down whatever the opponent is doing. Venser is kind of our... Well, there's a few permission spells in the deck, but this is really the best way of stopping something aggro coming at us mid-combat. Maul Drifter is probably the next card to get cut. It's just a nice follow-up to Jhoira to draw 2 cards. Archaeomancer and Izzet Chronarch are a part of another extra infinite turn combo. There's a Riptide Laboratory in the deck, so these two combine with that and enough mana that I can constantly pick up a Time Warp and take infinite turns. Then we have Laboratory Maniac, because of course there is a... Enter the Infinite in the deck. Just draw all the deck. I did run Wizard Tribal with a zombie in the previous build of this, because, I mean, I was running like over 20 wizards, and that did make Laboratory Maniac a good win. That was a much more casual version of the deck. Fluffy, tiny 2/2 wizards don't last very long on the board. But this is just a game-ending card. And then, of course, there's the Teferi, probably the most important creature in the entire deck. Not a lot of creatures don't care about flash, but protecting our spells is much, much more important. You can even flash him out on your upkeep or the end of an opponent's turn to stop someone from trying to counter something coming off suspend. Now, the issue is if someone clones this, you cannot have things come off suspend. Because suspend would be attempting to cast something when you cannot legally cast a sorcery. So while he is the most important card in the deck, if you see him on the opponent's side, you are going to be hard casting your spells very slowly. Let's go through the rest of the techie spells. There's a few bits of permission. Essentially the 2 drops, a counter spell that helps us draw cards. This is essentially a combo deck, so I don't care about the inevitability of what the opponent is trying to do as long as they don't stop me. So we have 2. This one's nice also because it's situational. It can stop a spell temporarily. It's like a remand in that effect. Or it can bounce an aggro creature or even save Jhoira. Delay is on theme with the Time Warps and the Jhoira, the Suspend, whatnot. Again, it's by the time their opponent is able to actually cast something that's threatening that I would like to delay, I'm hopefully getting close to where I can start taking over the game and taking extra turns. A generic counterspell. Mana Drain would be in the deck if I had all the mana, because that would obviously help push out a Time Warp much easier. And Counterflux is here just to help against the counter battles. Then we have a few answers in Cyclonic Rift. Capsize is another win condition. If we have infinite turns, then we have infinite capsizes. We can just bounce every permanent, eventually just attack with Jhoira for 21 commander damage. Blast Act is our only sweeper, and then Ruination and Back to Basics. This is new compared to what my previous decks were running. This deck runs mass basic lands. This is a leftover from Crom when I was playing the Staxy Crom aggro, like whatever that deck was. There's a few fetch lands in the deck. There's 2 non-basics, an Ancient Tomb and a Riptide Lab. But past that, it's all basics. The deck is predominantly blue, so we don't really need a lot of red mana, and this has actually worked out pretty well. This is essentially a nice delay effect, giving us ample time to get up to where we can cast our threatening spells. Ruination is usually a way of setting back the opponents tremendously. Let's go on through some more spells. We have lots of ways of drawing cards. So if we do not have an enabler to cast our spells, or even if we have an enabler, sometimes it's a good idea just to discard and continually cast high draw spells. Dream Halls itself is a broken card, so if we see a few wheel effects, we can typically draw ourselves through the deck until we've actually won the game. So Ancestral is nice early. It's on theme with Jhoira. We have Serum for early drop and Ponder. These two are just to help us get some landfall early game. Same thing with Impulse. It can help us look for a combo piece or land. And then we have the big high draw. This is really where the deck starts breaking down to being like an obnoxious combo deck. If we have Dream Halls out, or even Omniscience, whatever, then just chaining these big draw effects, Time Twister, Wheel of Fortune, Time Reversal, Time Spiral, draw 7, draw 7, draw 7, draw 7. So any kind of draw 7 effect with Dream Halls means that we're just going to continually fill and play the best cards, keep taking warps and warps and warps. We have a few instant speed draws, trying to sculpt our hand essentially at the end of the opponent's turn to create that game-winning situation. And Recurring Insight is a leftover. This may be coming out for a better effect. Rebounding this does not work if you suspend it. Rebound only works if it's coming from hand. And then Enter the Infinite. This is something that putting on Jhoira is just annoying. As soon as you suspend this off Jhoira, the opponents will all out attack and hate you. They have to. I mean, if you are allowed to draw your deck and you have the mana to cast and resolve Dream Halls, then you almost always win the game. Now let's go through. There's a few tutors. We have Mystical Tutor. This can help us get the Miracle Tutor, or Miracle Time Warp on top of the deck, or whatever we need. We have a Personal Tutor. This is just for sorceries, but most of our deck is sorcery. Intuition. This is a broken card. It is a tutor for 3 of the same thing in this deck. Usually I'll go get 3 Time Warps or 3 Recursion spells. There is a Mizzix Mastery coming up, so of course that's one way of filling the graveyard is with Intuition. Recoup to help rebuy a wheel or a warp. Same thing. Same thing. This can come off of Jhoira, and I can target the opponent's ramp and one of my previously spent Time Warps or draw effects. I do hate seeing this card come in my hand after I resolve like a Time Twister or a Time Spiral, because it removes the graveyards or Time Reversal. So those 3 cards tend to make this a dead card. So this may actually be one of the next cards coming out, but this is possibly 6 mana for a Time Warp plus something. And Mizzix Mastery. This is a dumb broken card. It rebuys the entire graveyard. There's a few other derpy spells that come up. That's coming up right now. Actually, we'll get through. Sometimes, again, this is a game-ending card itself if the opponent can't deal with the most threatening thing in their deck. This is something great to hold into your hand after you suspended something on turn 4 with Jhoira. And on turn 5, you just go get a threat to distract them while your cards come off suspend. Same thing with Acquire and Knowledge Exploitation. I like actually putting these both on Jhoira. Acquire, you may be tempted just to cast on turn 5. But seeing a non-threatening spell on suspend with Jhoira does actually deflect some attention. Most people are afraid of what you're going to suspend with her. But seeing something casual like this, or something that will most likely just hit a ramp spell or a draw spell, that does kind of deflect a bit of the attention away. Not always. With all these spells, there's of course a Mind's Desire. This is, again, kind of a filler. This is not exactly competitive in this deck. This is not a Storm deck. What we can do, although, is we can suspend a bunch of shit off Jhoira, Like if we have 3 spells coming off Jhoira on one turn, that gives us 3 Storm. This deck used to run all the reverberate effects, because that would help us actually copy spells coming off Jhoira. There was also the wizard that tapped to copy a spell. There was things like the Mirari to copy spells. Those were not competitive. Those were casual jank shit. But they're fun. And they made this fun. But this is essentially just going to be usually a storm of 2 or 3. Nothing really impertinent. If we had infinite mana, of course, we could suspend our entire hand in the wheel and keep on doing that. And then wait 4 turns. Waiting 4 turns doesn't seem good. Then we have a treachery. Just like bribery, this is something that we can cast on about turn 5. After we have suspended a threat with Jhoira, we can go stall out the game by taking their best creature. This also gives us the mana to keep on casting shit, of course. Let's go through. Let's see, I've done the spells, the creatures. Oh, here's some extra generic shit. Top is kind of not needed for the deck. We do have 1 single fetch land in the deck, but this is here just to help us set up for the next few turns. This is, of course, a way of winning with Laboratory Maniac because it can draw us the last card. Sword of the Animist. This is another way, kind of a sneaky way. If there's nothing interesting to suspend with Jhoira, it's actually pretty good to just cast and equip and attack her. With her, because you're getting the lands. Again, the deck wins by having all the lands to cast the big scary spells, so literally swinging with your 3/3 Jhoira to get an extra land is perfectly good. We have a few bits of ramp in here. We have a mana crypt, so we have a potential turn 2 Jhoira. Soul Ring, turn 2 Jhoira. Turn 3 Jhoira, of course, with Wayfarer's Bauble. This is just a way of getting lands out, which we need. Thought Vessel for infinite hand size. Mind Stone, another way of drawing the deck, or our last draw trigger with the Lab Man. And the last bits here are the lands. We have 2 non-basics that will stick around, Ancient Tomb and Riptide. This is a combo piece with the Archaeomancer and the Izzet Chronarch, taking infinite turns just by rebuying the wizard. We have a Tarn, a Terramorphic, an Evolving Wilds, and a Myriad Landscape to help get all of these non-basic lands. I believe there's almost 20 islands and 10 mountains. They're all these old DCI, Mirrodin promo ones. I just like them. They're not foil. I'm a foil whore, but I just like the artwork on these cards. But that is my current rendition of Jhoira. I believe this is the 3rd or 4th Jhoira video I've posted on my channel. This is not as annoying as the 30 counterspell Jhoira deck, but it seems to be more consistent. I'm going to keep streamlining. I like the idea of just optimizing it and setting aside so when new time warps come out I can just assess them. But yeah, if you like Jhoira, just give me some feedback. I love Jhoira. She's one of my favorites. I need to go dig out the Modern Masters foil one that a buddy got for me a while ago and stick her with this Jhoira, so I have 2 options because I like both artworks, the original and the new one. But yeah, any feedback always welcome. Cheers.